What's up guys, Reese here from reese3d.com. In the last video, we learned about the user interface of Photoshop. We also created a blank document in A4 size. In this video, we will get into creating shapes in Photoshop. Now before getting into shapes, it's better to understand a basic concept called vector graphics and raster graphics. I've made a complete video in explaining what is vector graphics and what is raster graphics, so you can watch that. I've added the video link in the description. I will also add a link up here somewhere there. It is really important to understand this concept before we jump into creating shapes in Photoshop. So I recommend that you watch that video and then come back here. So pause this video, go ahead and watch that, and then get back here. I hope you did that. Okay, so Photoshop is a raster-based software, but we do have options to create vector graphics inside Photoshop. But keep in mind, those vector graphics will be preserved as vectors as long as you keep it as a PSD file or a Photoshop document file. Once you save that file as a JPG image, it becomes a raster-based image, right? So you will lose the vectors quality. So if you want to maintain them, make sure that you keep them as a Photoshop document, that is a PSD file. Okay, so let's create our first shape. If you go to the toolbox and down here you will find a rectangle tool. Now if I click and hold, it actually opens up a lot of other shapes. So let's just click on the rectangle tool, and all I'm going to do is before we create the shape, let's go ahead and look up here in our options bar, and there we have three different options here. The first one says shape, the second one says path, and the third one says pixels. Now by default, pixels is being chosen. So what it's basically going to do is, if I draw just like that, it's actually creating a raster graphics rectangle shape. That means if I make this bigger, it will basically lose its quality because it's rectangle shape. We're not going to see that anyways. So let me just undo that and go up here, and instead let's choose path. And now if I click and drag, you will not see any color or anything, but you will just have a simple outline. Keep in mind, work path does not come in our final image. So if we make this as a JPG image, this work path will not be visible, right? But these are like helpers that helps us to create selections and other stuff. Okay, so let's just leave that path also. I'm going to delete that by pressing delete key. Okay, now let's go back and change this to shape, and that's exactly what we wanted. So when I choose shape, it gives me a lot of other options. Let's say like fill color, it has stroke color. Okay, so let me just choose a fill color to be, okay, let it be red, and for stroke I'm going to choose something like black. Okay, so fill color is basically the color that you see inside, and the stroke is the color of the outline. Okay, and we can also choose a different thickness for that outline and a few other properties. So let me just click and drag. So that basically helps us to create a rectangle there. Okay, so once we create like this, you will also notice that it creates a new layer here, right? And the new layer has the rectangle that we created, and the rest of the area is looking like box, box, box. That actually means that those areas are transparent. Good. And you will also notice that there's a small icon here that says that this particular layer is a vector layer or a shape layer. Now because it's a shape layer, we can maximize or magnify it to any big size that we want without losing quality. Cool. Now once we create a shape, we also get these little properties here. Okay, so that gives us a lot of further options to modify how we want this rectangle to look. For example, down here we have little pixels here for these different corners, and they're all actually locked, right? So if I just give here 10, and notice what happens, it actually made all those three or all those four boxes to be 10, and you will actually see a little difference here. Okay, let me just make it a bit bigger so that we can see much more clearly. So let me make it 50, and there you see that difference. You see that it becomes more curved. Okay, let me make it 100 pixels. There you go. So that is more obvious now. Let's say I have this black border, but I don't see it much, so I can actually increase the border thickness. So when I make it 20 pixels, I think that should be more clear. Yes. So now you can see that it becomes more thicker. Let me make it 50. There you go. So now you see that it becomes more thicker and thicker. I can also choose a different type of outline. So let's say, for example, a dotted line or a dashed line. So depending on the kind of shape that you want, you can also create a custom line style, right? So you can have a dash for certain pixels, and then you can have a gap for certain pixels, and then again a dash for certain pixels, and so on and so forth. So let's just leave it as it is. And then we have decisions about whether we want this stroke to be inside the path or you want it to be outside. Let's say here it is inside, and if I choose on the line, then it becomes on this path, and I can also change that outside, so it goes outside. Let me just bring this back to the straight line. Good. So depending on what kind of result that you want, you can actually choose that. And these two things basically decides about the end of a path. Okay, so we cannot see it here. I will have to show you some sharp lines to illustrate how that's going to work out. Okay, and we also have width and height and exact X position and Y position, right? And down here we have 4 options, and these helps us to decide how 2 shapes will interact with. Are they going to work together? Are they going to intercept with each other? And things like that. Let me show you how this works. Okay, we also have the same options up here. Okay, so that is new layer, combine shapes, which is the first one that you're seeing here, subtract, that's the second one, intersect, that's the third one, and exclude, that's the last one. Okay, so by default what happens is when we create a new shape, okay, it will basically take a new layer. Okay, so if I take the rectangle tool and I click and drag, now notice that you can actually press shift key while clicking and dragging. That will basically give us a perfect square if that's what you want. Okay, so then the moment I leave it, it becomes a new layer here. So you can see this is rectangle 1 and this is rectangle 2. Cool, that looks good. But if that's not what you want, you can actually choose here combine shapes. Okay, so now what happens is I'm selecting the rectangle 2 now, and I'm going to click and drag, and you will see that they both gets combined together, and you can actually see that the border goes out. Okay, and they are actually in the same layer. So there's no rectangle 3 layer, there's only rectangle 2 layer, and I can draw as many as I want. And you can see that these two are getting combined, but this one isn't, right? So this stays on top of it. That's why this rectangle is showing above the other rectangle, but they are not merged together in as a single object. Okay, but these ones are. So if I just click and drag, you can see that these 3 rectangles are actually moving together, but this one is being independent on its own. Okay, so the same way we also have these other options. So let's say, let me show you those also, and we can go up here and choose subtract from shape. So if I click and drag, you will see that it basically removes that shape, the place where we have drawn the new shape. If I choose the other one, let's say that is going to be intersect. So this is basically going to show us the common shape between the last drawn rectangle. The next one we also have is the exclude. So basically it excludes the overlapping area and it shows the rest of that area. Okay, so those are the different kind of blending modes that we have to make sure that these shapes are actually creating the result that we wanted. Let me just click and drag these guys. I'm going to pull them out, and let's look at the other shapes that we have. We also have a rounded rectangle. Okay, again, you have the properties of those to be modified. Okay, and we have ellipse, polygon. Let me just look at polygon. So if I choose polygon, it basically gives us one extra option here to decide how many sides we want to have for that polygon. So if I click and drag, and this is basically 5 sided polygon, which is a pentagon. We can also change this to, let's say, 6. And now if I draw something, you can see that it comes with 6 sides. Now, to keep things a bit more interesting, I'm going to change the color to, let's say, green. Okay, good. We need to deselect it to make sure that we get a new color option here. So there you go. So this one comes in a new color. You can also go to the deselect that and change the color to something else. Let's say purple. And this time I'm going to choose maybe 8 sides. Click and drag. Boom. There you go. So these are the ways we can create basic shapes, right? So if you want rectangle, square, and all these things, you can create whatever kind of shape that you want. Okay, now apart from these basic standard shapes, we also have custom shapes. So if I go in here and choose custom shape tool, that's going to give us a whole lot of options here. So if I just grab this down, okay, and we should have basically a lot of different type of shapes, right? So as you can see, we have a nice boat here. I can click on that and then click and drag. That will basically help us to create the shape that we wanted. Very beautiful. Now, apart from clicking and dragging, we can also simply click somewhere, and that'll give us these options. We can just click OK, and that'll basically create the same shape. Let me choose something else here. Let's say a tree, maybe a flower. Okay, so click on the flower, and this time I'm going to change the color. Something like that. Okay, so simply click and say OK, and that's going to give us the shape that we wanted. So let's try with one of these animals, like camel, for example. You can just simply click and drag, and you can actually press Shift key to make sure that you're having the same proportion there. Okay, so that basically creates the camel for us. So before we end this video, I want to show you how we can create our own custom shape so that we can repeat that same shape as many times as we want. Okay, to do that, you basically need to create a shape first. So let me just go ahead and select all these guys by pressing the Shift key and delete. That deletes everything. Cool. Now I'm going to take my rectangle tool, okay, and I'm going to simply create a simple shape here. Let's say I'll make this combined shape. Okay, so simply click and drag, and let me add something like that, maybe something like that. So this is the shape that I want to convert into a custom shape, right? So make sure that your shape is selected and go to edit, and there you should be able to find something that says define custom shape. Okay, now make sure that you have selected the shape that you want to convert into a custom shape, right? Sometimes this might be grayed out. That is because your shape is not selected. And let me show you what happens if your shape is not selected. And I go back to the edit menu, and you will see that the define custom shape is basically grayed out. That's because there's no shape being selected to make into a custom shape, right? So if this happens, you can simply go ahead and choose this black arrow, and then go ahead and click on the shape. Okay, sometimes it might take a minute. If it didn't, you can also click on the layer to make sure that you select that shape. So once the shape is selected, let's go to edit and choose define custom shape. So click on that, and then it'll ask you to create a name. Let me give Breeze 3D. There you go. Click OK, and we're done. Now what I can do is I can simply delete this shape here, and if I go back to my custom shape, and up here we should be able to find the custom shape that we created. Now what I can do is I can click on this guy and click here and say OK, and there you go. Okay, so if I just zoom in, that's exactly the shape that we wanted. Now keep in mind, this is a vector shape, so we can actually make this as big as we want without losing the quality, right? And we can actually create as many as we want. So if I just click back to the same tool and make sure that that is selected, and I can simply choose click and drag. So that creates a new one. Click and drag, that creates another one, another one, another one, and as many as we want. So this completes this video. If you have any questions, you can write them in the comment section below, or you can contact me through one of the social media links. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.